Beyond the Fence Line, a podcast brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust. Created by landowners for landowners, we're proud to play a role in conserving the Texas legacy of wide open spaces.
Thanks for joining us on Beyond the Fence Line. Starting this month, we're going to open up our podcast platform up to our own staff here at TALT to host and share more on their areas of expertise. So listen along as they bring their own guests to explore conservation resources for landowners and help celebrate the culture of our great state of Texas. This month, you'll hear from TALT's Stewardship Manager, Hannah Blankenship, along with TALT's regional stewards, Pfeil, Ken Cearley, and Clay Miller, to talk about how TALT connects with landowners across the state. Hope you enjoy.
Welcome to Beyond the Fence Line. I'm Hannah Blankenship, TALT Stewardship Manager. Today I want to talk about how we connect with landowners across our great state of Texas. I'm joined by Pfeil, Ken Cearley, and Clay Miller, who are our regional stewards here at TALT and are very instrumental in this process. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. Looking forward to it.
Before we jump in, I'd like to give our listeners a little bit of a background on our Regional Steward program. This is a fairly new program, but the idea behind it is simple. We wanted to find a way to connect with landowners and be a trusted resource for those folks who are thinking about doing conservation easements. It's not just for landowners, though. It's also for agency staff and people who don't deal with these programs on a day-to-day basis. What better resource for them than their own neighbors? Our regional stewards are landowners themselves and understand the unique challenges their neighbors face. Clay, tell us a little bit more about the beauty of this.
Sure. I feel that my day-to-day involvement with the ranch and tending to livestock, it keeps me pretty grounded as far as staying connected with other landowners and the challenges that they face on a day-to-day basis, simply because I'm involved in those same challenges too. And that really helps me, I feel, as being the regional steward for the Trans-Pecos region. It makes me feel more connected with them, knowing the challenges that they face. And I think that's been a huge help for me getting started with TALT.
Right. And so, of Clay, you being in the Trans-Pecos region, I forgot to mention that Ken Cearley is our regional steward in the Panhandle and Southern Rolling Plains region, and Pfeil is our regional steward in the Gulf Coast region. So Ken, why don't you go next and talk about up in the Panhandle?
Well, as Hannah said, I look after TALT's interest, you might say, in the High Plains, South Plains, and Rolling Plains part of the state. And I guess the advantage of myself being here is that I was Extension Wildlife Specialist for Texas Agri-Life Extension Service, Texas A&M University, for 7 years up here, and covered this part of the state as well as some country further south and to the west. And on top of that, I have since having retired, I have a consulting company that is involved with ranchers in the area as well as around the state. So I enjoy being with ranchers. I enjoy keeping up with what's going on in the ranching world and being able to apply some of that knowledge to helping people in this part of the state when it comes to Texas Ag Land Trust. It's enjoyable work. I appreciate the chance to work with landowners and ranchers in this part of the world, and am happy to help them in any way I can. I think I end up learning more from them than they learn from me, but I'm available if they need any kind of help, especially as it pertains to a conservation easement. That's the main thing we're helping people with.
Mm-hmm. And on your point too, I definitely enjoy working too. And there's always that saying, if you love what you do, you don't work a day in your life, right?
That's right. Exactly right.
So Brad, how about you?
Sure. So I live in Rockport, Texas, just north of Corpus on the coast. And we are relatively new to the Rockport area, but not so new to the Gulf region in general. So I work up and down the Gulf region, and also over into South Texas area, because that's a little more of my background. I spent about 10 years managing private production agriculture holdings over in the Southwest Texas area in the brush country, cow-calf operations and commercial hunting operations, a little bit of farming operations. And that was my background over in that area. And the wildlife side of things has kind of always been my largest passion in the agriculture realm. So I kind of continued on with that, and it played in well working with TALT. Once I started working with TALT a couple of years ago down there in the Gulf region, I still have quite a bit of interaction consulting with ranchers down along the Gulf region and over into South Texas as well on commercial hunting operations, and also contract work quite a bit with them in the hunting season, kind of the fall and the spring. And that's a lot of what keeps me busy throughout the year. But as the others have said, and I'll echo it, and Ken made a great point on it. I thoroughly enjoy working with landowners, working with ranchers, and this has been a great opportunity to stay heavily involved with the ranching community in my region and throughout the state, and kind of continue my passion of land management, land preservation, land conservation back when I was full-time managing property. This kind of just took it to the next level, the next scale up in a statewide level, and working with multiple landowners and their conservation goals. And it's really been a pleasure. The people I've met and working with the TALT team has just been a thoroughly enjoyable and an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you, Brad. And I definitely agree. Working with each of you has definitely been a pleasure. And you guys definitely know each of your respective regions and definitely serve as a trusted resource for your respective regions on behalf of TALT. So we really appreciate that and love that this program has taken off like it has. I'm really excited about it and hope to be able to expand it even further. So another valuable piece of each of your roles is your ability to support TALT in our annual monitoring. And for those of you that don't know, annual monitoring is sort of a requirement for conservation easements. And that's just our way of being able to make sure that the person who put the conservation easement on the property is having their goals and objectives upheld in perpetuity. And so Texas is a really big state, and it's really hard to get to each of our properties annually. And so we have our regional stewards help us out with that. So it's really valuable to have somebody come onto your property. Number one, that understands working lands, and number two, that you can know and trust. Do you guys want to say something about that?
Well, this is Ken. It's my favorite time of the year, I guess, after Christmas. It's a chance to see old friends and see what they're up to now, visit the places, see some well-managed country. And so it's a joy to get out and do this part of my job. It's a favorite part of my job. And so it's something I look forward to, and something I hope is not a burden to the landowner. I try my best for it not to be that way, and to make sure it's at their convenience and it doesn't interfere with anything they've got going on management wise. But it usually works out pretty easily, and it's something that is real enjoyable. And I hope the landowner thinks the same thing.
I agree. Clay, how about you?
Yeah, I'm going to mirror a little bit of what Ken said. It's one of my favorite things to do. A lot of it because, having grown up here in the Trans-Pecos, and we've got 7 easements here, and they're on some places that I had never been to before, and then always wanted to see those places just for my curiosity, being a ranch kid growing up. You always want to see the country across your fence, and so having the opportunity to go see those ranches, it's so much fun for me. And luckily for me, several of our easement holders are longtime friends of mine, or either the owner is or the manager is. So that makes it really easy for both the easement holder and for me, just already having that relationship in place. And so, yeah, it's so much fun, and I appreciate so much what these landowners are doing. We have several quotes from landowners, and probably my favorite is actually from an easement that I monitor. And it's, "This land is too important for its future to be left to fate." And to me, I think that says it all right there in a very simple sentence. And it reflects how important the land is to these people, that they're willing to go to have this easement in place for forever, and they realize the importance of it and what it's going to protect for until time ends, more or less. And what I really appreciate about some of these landowners is, you kind of think that, well, it's these multi-generational ranches that have had it for 5 or 6 generations and they want to protect it. Well, that's not always the case. We have some that are new landowners in this area. And the fact that they can already see, as new landowners and newcomers to this area, the importance of preserving this land, I think it speaks volume to their character, not having grown up and watch what their granddaddy or their great granddaddy went through to keep this land, but just a single generation, and they already realize it's so important to preserve this land, because as we've said before, they're not making any more. This is all we've got, and we need to do the best that we can, to protect it.
I agree 100%. The monitoring is definitely my favorite part as well. Just growing up on a ranch as well, it definitely is exciting to be able to go to a new place and to be able to network with other landowners and be able to learn about their operations and maybe be able to apply something to my own operation as well.
I gotta say, I can't say it any better than y'all have already stated it. So I'll just go a little different direction with it. Y'all have hit everything that I was gonna say and more. And both Clay and Ken have been at this longer than I have and have developed relationships, and I'm looking forward to that part of it. With these monitoring cycles coming around here pretty soon, I'm just really excited to build these relationships with our current. We do not have very many in my region, so it allows me to focus on the few that we do have and try to build those relationships up. And I think that's a key part of what the Steward program is all about. We have a large part of outreach and making new connections and working with landowners and different agencies and different conservation groups. But, I think the monitoring and the relationship side of, keeping that contact with our current easement holders and landowners and building those relationships where they're, more than comfortable and have a contact, they can call up or text or whatever is most comfortable for them and ask a question, that may pertain to the easement or things that they're planning and trying to work out for the future. And it's just so important to have somebody that they're very, very comfortable with, reaching out to and working with, and, staying abreast of any new items that are coming their way with some of these things that, TALT is starting to work with on the ecosystem service markets and things like that. I think having a firm contact and relationship built with our landowners is extremely important. So I'm definitely looking forward to that part of my work with TALT and building those relationships in the Gulf region, the South Texas area in general. I'm very excited about it.
Thank you, Brad. We are too. So apart from working with landowners in the early stages, we also love hearing stories from you guys on landowners that you've met and helped throughout the years, whether it was with TALT or your own respective areas. Sometimes these guys become your friends and you share stories and lessons. Do you guys have any stories that you'd like to share today? Ken, how about you go first?
Hannah, we had a interesting thing happen, a sad thing really. Pretty big wildfire in 2017 here in the Panhandle. It wasn't as big as the one in 2006, but it took some lives and destroyed a lot of houses and burned up a lot of rangeland unexpectedly. Fire is a friend of rangeland, but when it happens unexpectedly, you're counting on that forage, and all of a sudden it ruins the economics of your ranching operation for a while, even though it's going to be a benefit in the future. But one particular rancher for whom we hold an easement had a band of horses on his place. He was gone from his place when the fire happened, and his neighbor came in, loaded up his horses, and took them off to safety. And without him ever knowing about it, of course, he didn't even know about the fire, and much less the fact that it was affecting his place. He ended up losing all the grass on his place. His main structures were saved. And of course, his horses were saved, and his cattle moved down toward a greener part of the ranch, which was next to a big lake they've got on the place, and they survived. But thanks to that good neighbor, he kept all of his horses. And so it's not a surprising thing. Neighbors help neighbors all the time, but when something like that happens, it really touches you, and it makes you realize the relationships that ranchers have and how much they care for each other and take care of each other.
Wow.
I'll share just a short story, and it's not necessarily TALT related, but it does kind of tie to conservation easements, and it was interesting to me, and I had a personal connection through kind of one of my best friends growing up. So there's a rancher outside of Texas over in New Mexico, and they were getting up in age, and they were in a position that they didn't have the standard, ability to pass down the ranch to the next generation. The next generation wasn't necessarily interested in, having anything to do with the ranching operations. And the owners were very, very passionate about keeping this land in the family. It had been in the family for, I believe, 4 generations already, if not 5. And they were trying to find a vehicle to keep it in the family and maybe skip a generation or just have it available for those future generations to come back if anyone ever took interest in it. And they were struggling to find a plan and a way to make that happen. And as it turns out, they had always, they have about 300 head seed stock operation, and they had always run the cattle themselves. They had done pretty much everything they could on the ranch themselves, hired in a little bit of day labor here and there, but they were getting up in their mid to late 60s, and it just wasn't an option anymore. So they figured out they were going to have to bring in somebody that would basically act as a manager, but grow into a position of a managing operator on the property, and take over the full operations and run it for the next generation as if it was their own. And a good friend of mine had kind of had the life goal of managing property for private families, and he went to TCU and ranch management school, and had several years of experience and background, and he got the job with his family out in New Mexico, and he's been with them for about 5 years now. And part of that transition was, how do you make this all pay? How do you make the money, make sense to have a full-time person operating it, and figuring out in tough, arid country, where you can't run high numbers of stocking rates. How do you make 300 head, pay for all these new additions to the operation that weren't traditionally there, like this fella and the housing and the vehicles and everything that goes along with it. And with their conservation mindset, they looked at a conservation easement and thought that would be an excellent route to, one, accomplishing their goal of preserving this property, forever as a agriculture property and keeping it in ranching, and two, with a paid easement, bringing some immediate liquidity back to the operation and accomplishing some of these goals of bringing in this new person and making those dynamics work. So they're in their, I guess, third year of working through the process, and they are going to get their first contract finalized this year in 2022, and they're going to phase it in over 3 years, I believe. But with the conservation easement, it was a solution to multiple questions that they had to keep this ranch land in the family and keep it moving on through generations. So it was an interesting story, and I got to watch the whole thing unfold. And even though it wasn't directly with us, it was a really unique situation to watch it from the inside, come through and see how these easements and conservation companies can really and truly make a difference, and whether land stays in the family or not. So yeah, it was a neat process.
I love hearing stories like that. I mean, we always say that conservation easements are just another tool in the toolbox. It definitely doesn't work for everybody, but when it does work and it works that well, and you can use it in different ways and be able to phase acreages in like that, it definitely is a great thing. And I love hearing stories like that. Clay, how about you?
Sure. One of our easement holders, he's my age, and I kind of knew of him and knew who he was for several years. But his father is actually the one who, and his father and my grandfather were counterparts, contemporaries, whatever you want to call them. And so, developing this new relationship with the current landowner has really been a lot of fun for me, just because of and now the relationship that we have, through TALT and the easement, to be able to continue that relationship through TALT between the families. I've really enjoyed that. And like I said, we're the same age, and when you live out here in this sparsely populated area, you don't, even though there's very few of us, sometimes you never meet any of them just because you're busy and there's a lot of distance. The last few years that I've spent monitoring the easements, that we find out how much in common that we have, and the same people that we know, and the exact same experiences we've had, both being ranch kids and what have you. So that's been nice. I've really enjoyed getting to know their family better and continuing that relationship. One other easement holder is a young couple, and they have, I believe, 4 boys and a girl, and they're all very young children. And those kids, you never see them, but what, they don't have a cowboy hat on, their pants tucked in their boots, and by golly, they've got a load of horses and they're going somewhere to work cattle. And to me, coming from a ranching family, and always in the back of your mind, and really probably more so now in the front of your mind, what's going to happen to this land? What's going to happen to the ranching industry? You always hear there's less people involved in it, and these young kids aren't involved in it. And to see those 5 children actively involved every day, day to day, in the family's cattle operation, it really, not to seem hokey, but it really swells your heart. It really, for me, it does, because it's a little glimmer of hope that this is going to go on for one more year, and maybe 10 more years, hopefully 100 years. But just to be able to see that family in action with their children, it to me, that's what we work for. That's what we want to preserve and keep going, is anybody who is making a go at it. And it's not easy to do, and anybody will tell you, especially now, it's harder and harder every year to make money in the cattle business and owning property and trying to pay taxes on it. And these people are making a go at it. And I feel like that's what I'm here for. I'm here to help those people any way that I can. And if all I help is those, or is that one family, then I've done my job. If I can just help one person, I've done my job.
I agree. I really love that we have such passionate and knowledgeable regional stewards to be able to represent TALT throughout the state. So let's talk a little bit more about the outreach to agency personnel like NRCS and Texas Parks and Wildlife. Ken, I know you've done a lot of that in the Panhandle region, especially with your background. So can you talk a little bit more about how you do that?
Yeah, my background is distantly in ranching for over 20 years now. I have not been in ranching, but I've been more involved in education, at least through the Extension Service. But even back when I was ranching, and before that, when I was in some wildlife research, straight out of studying at A&M, I found the value of the Natural Resources Conservation Service. Through the years, they helped me with aspects of ranching. They were helping all they could with the research we were doing. And so I've had friends and acquaintances in the natural NRCS for decades. So for me, it seemed like the natural thing to do when I took this position as a regional steward, to get to every county office and meet the people that are there now, tell them about Texas Ag Land Trust and how we can help partner with them if they have a landowner that wants to utilize their ag, ag conservation easement program. And TALT does have a lot of people interested in that program. And so it's good for me, I think, to get around to all these offices in my areas of responsibility to make sure they know who I am and that we're sure enough ready to help them. People don't have to choose us as the land trust they use. We hope they do, but if they don't, I can still be a source of information for them as it pertains to how an easement is put together, the part the landowner has, the flexibility they have in creating an easement that fits them specifically, and what the cost is, all the various steps. We have, thanks to Jacqueline Roberts, the on staff at Texas Ag Land Trust, a very good brochure that in a concise way gives anyone that's interested an idea of the benefits, the disadvantages, and there are some, to conservation easement, as well as the costs associated with it and the process. So after you look at the benefits and the drawbacks, if you're still interested in the place, then it gives you an idea of what it'll cost you, how long it'll take, what the process looks like. And so I hand that out to every county agent. Well, I slipped there and talked about county agents. That's the Extension Service. I do visit those offices as well, but I make sure that the NRCS office, who's able to supply some of the money that would allow these people to do a conservation easement should they want to sell an easement, it's good to have that in the hands of the NRCS office so that they can share that with people and also get a little more educated on the process themselves. It's sort of arcane, you might say, that not everybody knows how a conservation easement works unless they're really considering using one on their place, and then they might start educating themselves on it. It's not complicated, it's just complex. That's the way I like to think of it. Yeah. And there's a lot of steps to it. So I'm still getting around to all those offices. I still have a few left in the Rolling Plains and some in West Central Texas. It is partly in the Rolling Plains. But I've enjoyed getting around, visiting with those folks. With COVID in place, we have to sit out on the front porch, so to speak, to visit, but that's fine. And we've made it work. And so that's what I'm up to right now in my region. Seems to be working okay. And I intend to maintain those relationships for the benefit of landowners that come to them.
Great. Thanks for sharing. So definitely shows the perseverance to be able to continue these meetings like this, especially mentioning COVID and having to be flexible. We really, really appreciate you being able to do that. And Brad, I know down in the Gulf Coast, there's a great network of conservation groups going. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So I've recently got involved with the Katy Prairie Conservancy. So they put together a grant proposal and received authorization and funding on their grant proposal for the Texas Coastal Prairies Initiative is the name of the new organization. And what it is a group of conservation entities. So there's about 20 plus separate conservation entities in there. You have, the names like Nature Conservancy and Galveston Bay Foundation, Audubon, and things like that people have heard of, as well as, TALT is definitely one of them, and a large one on the, the agriculture side of things. But what it is a good pot of funding that came down to allow for paid conservation easements on the Texas coastal prairies. And that, we've been working through the process. We have a monthly call working through the process of, identifying these target areas and these remnants of coastal prairie ecosystems. And there's a lot more out there than people would think of coastal prairie. People think the prairies being out in the Midwest and, maybe some of that blackland prairie up around Dallas Fort Worth, but there are some outstanding tall grass prairies still remaining, up and down the coast of Texas. And but they're disappearing, by the day. And every time you drive some of those roads headed east towards Houston, it seems like I get over that way maybe once a month and I see a new housing development broke out. And they don't break them out on, the swampland. They don't break them out on, the marginal ground. They seem to always be broke out on the most prime land out there, the easiest and most prime land out there, taking out agricultural lands. And working with this group, we've identified, I think, 13 different focus areas in starting up around north of Houston down to kind of the Galveston area, and then going down the coast down to Victoria area. That will be the focus points for this specific initiative. And as that goes forward, we'll kind of move through a application and ranking process, kind of like we do with other paid easements and paid easement applications. When we go in for funding for a paid easement application, we're going to go through the same process on this group. And yeah, it's exciting to see another resource for funding on easements coming into my area. So, and it's been great working with these different conservation entities, and I knew some of them. I had contacts in some, and it's interesting because as in agriculture, as producers, when the name Nature Conservancy comes up, a lot of people cringe, and for good reason in some cases. There's some issues in the past, and there's things that aren't necessarily friendly to agriculture and ag practices in a lot of these different entities. But building these relationships with these people that work in these different entities and being able to pass information back and forth. Just the other day, I had a contact from the Audubon Society, Texas Audubon, bring a landowner to me and say, hey, look, they're looking at an easement, ag specific. They want to run cattle. They're interested in TALT. So, and they brought me somebody that I probably wouldn't have had other exposure to. So building these relationships, I think, is very important with these other conservation entities, whether we traditionally think we like them or not, or what they stand for, or what they do. You can still build these relationships, and it brings more people to the table and gets more information out there. And an easement isn't one size fits all for anybody. And having the ability to give a landowner information on whatever meets their goals the best, whether that be us or one of these other groups, and hopefully the same on the other side, and just like this fellow at Audubon did for us, bringing someone to the table for us that fit our group much better than what he was currently looking at. So I think this networking with agencies as well as other conservation groups, and on a state and national level is just super important, and that's a big part of our role in our regions.
I agree. And the advancing conservation in Texas really resonates with me on what you said, being able to be open to new groups and help landowners regardless if it's us or a different conservation group. The shared goal is advancing conservation in Texas, and I think that's what's most important, and definitely what you guys keep in mind on your day-to-day activities, and that's what makes this regional steward program so awesome. And Clay, I know that there's a big network of conservation in the Trans-Pecos region too. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. And I hate following Ken and Brad, because now what am I going to say? Ditto. Y'all guys, that was so good, Brad and Ken both. Yeah. You touched on it, Hannah, about how TALT, we want to be a tool in the toolbox, and I've got so many good tools in my toolboxes here. The NRCS, and y'all have all mentioned them, the NRCS, Ag Life Extension, golly, those I've probably met more people, just because I do know some of the people at NRCS. They'll contact me and say, hey, this person, you maybe want to talk to them, maybe introduce yourself and tell them what TALT is, because like y'all have mentioned, a lot of people aren't aware of TALT and aren't aware of how we conduct our easements, how we hold our easements, and Brad, you touched on this, and I really don't want to bring up the name, but there's a lot of really strong feelings about easements in the Trans-Pecos region, and I had them. I'm not gonna deny that. I had pretty strong feelings about easements, but the way we conduct our easements, and we've got more and more every year. I think that the word has gotten out, and I think it's through agencies like NRCS. Ag Life Extension. I sit on the Trans-Pecos board for the Grazing Lands Coalition, also the Jeff Davis County Underground Water District, and my father has been on the SWCD for Highland region there at Marfa for, 30 years. So, we know a lot of the same people, a lot of people that have been involved for 20 or 30 plus years, and gosh, you can't ask for a better network of people to help, kind of spread the word about what TALT does. And another one of our partners is the Borderland Research Institute at Saul Ross, and we're partners with them. And they've just really done a fantastic job, and quite honestly made my job pretty easy, having them spread the word, talk to people about conservation easements. And it's just really nice to have a nice network of people to work with. It truly does make all that we do, it makes it very easy.
I agree. And just in our conversations today, it's definitely apparent how wide our reach is across Texas, and all different subjects and different networks. And you guys are doing an outstanding job. And I'm excited to have this program continue and grow. And just want to thank you guys for joining me this week.
Yep. Thank you for having us. Enjoyed it.
Yeah. Thank you for hosting, Hannah. It's been a great conversation, and I love hearing these other stewards talk about their areas. We talk quite a bit, but it's good to sit down and talk specifically about what we do.
Yeah. Thank you, Hannah. I enjoyed it.
Great. I definitely love showing off our great team here at TALT. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, our other staff members will be hosting other podcasts as well. So I'm excited to hand the reins over to each of them in the coming months as we dive into new subjects. For our listeners, if you enjoyed our podcast, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know what topics you'd love to hear more about. And thanks again for joining us. And be sure to join in next month for Beyond the Fence Line.
Beyond the Fence Line is brought to you by the Texas Agricultural Land Trust, dedicated to conserving the Texas heritage of agricultural lands, wildlife habitats, and natural resources. Find out more at txaglandtrust.org.